Hello, and welcome to the Orthodontic Products Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Werner. As consolidation continues to reshape orthodontics, more doctors are finding themselves at a crossroads. Do you keep expanding independently, or do you explore a partnership while your practice is still growing? The exit versus expand question isn't just about retirement anymore. It's about valuation, timing, risk, and what kind of career you want over the next decade. Today's market presents opportunities that didn't even exist a few years ago, but they come with complexity and a lot of misconceptions. To help unpack what orthodontists should actually be thinking about, I'm joined by Ty Ramsey. Ty is a mergers and acquisitions advisor with Professional Transition Strategies, where he works with doctors on practice valuations, partnerships, and competitive OSO and DSO processes. With more than 20 years in the dental industry, Ty brings a practical, real-world perspective on how these decisions play out and what orthodontists often get wrong when they wait too long to explore their options. Here's our conversation. Ty, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Really happy to be here and do another podcast with you.
Yeah, this is your second time with us. And so just for those who didn't see the last podcast, can you kind of talk a little bit about your background and kind of how it's relevant to today's conversation?
Sure. Yeah. I've been in the dental industry for a little over 20 years now. Spent a large part of my career. I was a national ICAT salesperson, which is, a high end
Yeah.
CBCT x ray.
Hmm.
In my career, I'd uh, had I was pretty blessed, did very well with that, sold
Hmm.
over 800 of those in my career, so
Hmm.
was able to develop a lot of great relationships through that, and then I parlayed that. I just kind of found myself in the, dental transitions, mergers, acquisitions world, whenever I left there. Started out as an independent consultant and then just kind of landed in this just through my relationships and have now been with professional. I was doing it as an independent for
Hmm.
about a year and a half. And then I joined Professional Transition Strategies, which is the largest M&A advisory privately held in the nation. And joined them about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about exit versus expand. So just to get started, at what point in an orthodontist career does the exit versus expand question usually become relevant?
Yeah, to sound like a politician, I mean, not to sound like a politician, but let's say it depends. I mean, well,
Mm,
the average age of our client last year was in the mid 40s.
mm, okay.
And, in December, I transacted someone who was 72.
Mm,
So it's all over the board. It just depends on your goals.
mhm,
Also, last year transacted a couple of partners that were late 30s, early 40s. So
okay.
it really depends on your career trajectory and can range all the way from, like the lower end there, all the way up to, well into retirement
Mhm.
age.
Okay. So what would you say are the biggest misconceptions orthodontists have about selling or partnering while their practice is still growing?
Yeah, I think it's the belief that everyone likes to call it selling.
Mhm.
It's not selling. It's if it's done right, it's a partnership.
Mm,
So there's a lot of misconceptions about selling to corporate.
yeah.
Well, and that's part of my job is to screen out those corporate type DSOs. Believe it
Mhm.
or not, there are 350 plus self-identifying DSOs.
Okay.
And there are probably, well over 100 that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But
Mhm.
there are many that are doctor led, doctor owned, that allow full clinical autonomy for the doctor. So,
Mhm.
one of the biggest misconceptions is that the doctor is going to lose control and lose his identity moving
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
Not going to get to keep his staff, going to have to change the name. All of a sudden, going to show up. There's going to be new employees there. None of that is true. It's a true collaborative partnership.
Okay.
And if a doctor, could envision taking all the things that he or she hates to do off their plate, such as, the administrative burden,
Mhm.
HR, payroll, staffing.
Hmm.
What if all that could be taken off of their plate
Yeah.
for them to just do what they love, dentistry,
Mm,
orthodontics?
okay. So, why can transitioning a practice during a growth phase kind of often lead to better valuations and financial outcomes than waiting, say, until later, like when you're ready to retire?
Yeah, so there's if you can imagine, for the people who don't have video, if you can imagine a graph of your career, like,
Hmm.
maybe you started off as an associate and then you either bought into a practice or hung a shingle and grew the practice. I mean, your career trajectory's going slowly up.
Hmm.
And then as you go on, it eventually plateaus.
Hmm.
And then you want to start working a little less towards, the last third of your career. You're kind of trailing off. And
Yeah.
a lot of practitioners make the mistake of, okay, well, I want to, go to the beach and hand over the keys to someone. Well,
Hmm.
if they had just planned about 5 years in advance, in many cases, it can make, seven figures difference on their
Oh.
retirement, because it makes a huge difference to catch a practice that is considering a partnership on an upswing
Hmm.
versus one that is in decline. It's going
Okay.
to be there's going to be much less demand for a practice in decline than there is for a practice on the rise.
Hmm. Okay. Well, kind of related to that, how can I've talked to you before, and how can a DSO or OSO partnership kind of actually accelerate growth for an orthodontic practice? Because you're talking about going in when you're growing, so how can it actually take it to a next level?
Yeah, in just I mean, in so many ways. For one, they're going to take, all the administrative and managerial burden off the doctor's shoulders.
Mhm.
And they've got best practices. There are a lot of consultants out there, a lot of great consultants that come
Mhm.
in and give advice. But just imagine having live data 24 hours a day. Oh, our 100 other practices. Here's what we did here. Here's how it worked. And just
Mhm.
having that live data and that collaboration. Also, same thing with marketing best practices across, all the different,
Yeah.
with the collaboration. Um, and there are just so many things that having all of that live data and having a group of like-minded doctors collaborate and grow towards a common goal. It's kind of like 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
Um, uh, 50 or 100 practices with the repetitive expenses centralized,
Mhm.
um, and collaboration amongst all the like-minded doctors is going to grow way faster than a 50 or 100 individual practices on an island.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked there a little bit about the resources you gain through that collaboration and working part of a bigger organization. Can you go a little further of the kinds of capabilities orthodontists typically gain access to through a partnership that are the hardest to build independently?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, it's just economies of scale. I mean, the
Mhm.
cost of their everyday supplies are, sometimes going to go down 20, 30,
Mhm.
40% right there.
Okay.
And then, that's one of the biggest things. And then also just the infrastructure, an infrastructure that is proven to work. The average orthodontic um, new partner with the right group is going to grow, right around 8 or 9% the
Mhm.
first year. And most of my clients have grown well in excess of that. I can think of, my last couple of orthodontic clients that I placed grew over 20% and 25% respectively,
Okay.
year over year, their very
Mhm.
first year. So there's it's just so many different things. Like I said, the marketing, the staffing, the admin, burden being eliminated, and all the
Mhm.
best practices and collaboration.
Okay. So, what operational or financial markers do DSOs and OSOs look for that kind of signal that a practice is ready for an acquisition?
Yeah, yeah, great question. There's it's something, I call it like a class A asset. It's
Mhm.
they want a certain amount of revenue and a certain amount of EBITDA, which
Okay.
is uh an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and
Mhm.
amortization. So I would say in general, the kind of the at the lower end, they're looking for practices generating, just around $100,000 a month. So let's call it 1.2 million in
Mhm.
annual collections and an EBITDA margin of around 20%, which in that
Okay.
case would be 240, 250,000.
Mhm.
That's at the very low end.
Okay.
So if your practices, fits into that scenario of those parameters,
Mhm.
it it'd be worth looking into.
Mm.
And even
Uh,
if it doesn't,
uh-huh.
if you have a smaller practice, it's still worth getting a professional valuation on that if you wish
Mhm.
to plan for have
Mm.
any kind of exit plan in mind in the
Yeah.
future.
Well, related to that, what risks do orthodontists take on when they delay exploring options
Mhm.
because they assume they're not ready yet?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, I had a live example of that. We had a client who we had a couple of offers for. They
Mhm.
decided to put that off, and they got ill and they passed away, and
Mm.
ended up having to sell the practice for a third of what we originally
Mm.
had done. So that's just reality. It allows you to take some chips off the table, um, and de-risk your life's work. So
Mm.
the risk, that's one of the risks. The other risk is, a lot of people think my practice is growing. I'm going to wait a couple of years. Well,
Mhm.
the market literally changes monthly in this
Mm.
business. So we
Okay.
don't know where the market's going to be in even a few months, few years.
Mhm.
We don't know. Could be, most experts think that um, every industry that has involved private equity investment has been a bell curve.
Mm.
Um, so it happened, industry consolidation. It happened 30 years ago in medical, 20 years ago in pharmaceutical, a little over 10 years ago in dental, veterinary, and
Yeah.
dermatology. There's far fewer vets and dermatologists than there are dentists. So those
Mm.
industries are reaching the consolidation point. Dental, there's around 200,000 unique NPI numbers in the
Mhm.
US. So just because there's more inventory, there's more of the consolidation wave left in dental. So
Okay.
what is consolidation? Consolidation is when 60 to 70% of all of the assets or practices, let's call them attractive practices to investors in private equity,
Mhm.
have been partnered with a group. And once we reach that, we'll go back to to the more traditional days of doctors no longer having the option to partner
Mm.
with a private equity backed group or being invested in directly by
Yeah.
private equity. It'll move more to my exit strategy now is to sell for 70 to 80% of collections to another individual,
Uh.
or do what's called a Mercer acquisition, in which you sell off pieces of your practice as you go,
Mhm.
or percentages in an effort to try to get somewhere in the 80 to 90% of collections over a period of years. But what we're in now in this consolidation wave allows doctors an opportunity that didn't exist a few years ago
Mm,
and probably won't exist a few years from now, which is
mm,
to get a much higher valuation and in many cases an exponentially better exit plan, and not even always an exit plan, just a partnership plan that is going to yield a better work life balance and better income over the course of
yeah.
their career.
Okay. So, for the kind of the growth minded orthodontist, what deal structures tend to make the most sense for them?
Yeah. So again, it depends. It depends on their goals. There are many different kinds of deal structures out there. There's one, we call it an equity roll, and that's where the doctor gets an offer and a portion of it, say 70 or 80%,
Mhm.
is in cash, and the rest of it is in private company stock or equity in the group. Those and then the other on the other end of the spectrum is what's called a JV or a joint venture scenario. That's where the doctor sells a percentage of his practice and retains practice level equity in his own practice. So
Mm,
a doctor, might have a $2 million practice and sell 60% of it, and then maintain the other 40% um, ownership.
mhm,
So let's say that they have a $2 million practice and let me see, $2 million practice and 20% EBITDA margin. So let's call that 400,000 in EBITDA. That's basically the amount of money that the practice is spinning off after everyone's been paid, including
okay.
the doctor at a fair doctor wage.
Okay.
So the doctor would partner with a group, get a nice payday, and then moving forward, be paid a fair doctor wage. And then
Mhm.
on top of that, get distributions for 40% of the profits.
Okay.
So 40% of those profits would be 160,000. So
Mm,
he or she just stayed level, that'd be 160,000 in profit distributions.
okay.
We have many examples where doctors have partnered in that scenario and then grown so much that their 30 or 40% of practice level equity after the growth, they end up recovering their original income they were making as a single practitioner and
Mhm.
sometimes even exceed it.
Okay.
In the first back to the first example I gave, where it's partially paid out for cash and then the rest in private company stock.
Mhm.
Historically, that private company stock, private in these private equity funds, has appreciated 3 to 5x dollar on dollar every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So, in this same example, where we have a $2 million practice, let's say, you might have 1.5 million of it paid in cash and then the other 500,000 paid in private company stock.
Uh-huh.
Fast forward 5 years, you might have a 5x return on that private company stock. So you've got another 2.5 million in wealth accumulation. So we've just turned a $2 million practice that, if
Mhm.
sold to another practitioner, would probably sell in the 1.5 to $1.6 million range. We've just turned that into a $4 million practice through what
Okay.
we call equity arbitrage.
Okay.
So so 2 very different offers. There are
Mhm.
some combination of the 2 where it's
Mm,
a joint venture and you get the private holding company stock as well.
okay. 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 So, what questions should orthodontists ask themselves before deciding whether to exit or expand?
Uh-huh. I think it starts with hiring a good advisor. like
Okay.
our company, you want to get professional advice. I mean,
Mhm.
if my teeth are crooked and let's say I've got a class 2 div 2, I'm not going to
Mhm.
watch a video and then try to treat myself.
Mhm.
I'm going to go to a professional, an orthodontist, and get treatment.
Mhm.
That's the analogy I like to use. This is what we do.
Mhm.
Professional Transition Strategies, the company I'm with, we've done over $1 billion in deals for our clients.
Mhm.
On average, we do about 100 partnerships a year. So this is what we do. So the number one thing I would say is get a professional to help you out. Just like if you're going into court for something,
Yeah.
like let's say some big court case, you wouldn't go in and try to represent yourself.
Mhm.
Same thing here. We deal with all these different DSOs and private equity groups. We know everything about them. I can't put enough stress on the importance of getting a good advisor when you're looking into this. And that starts with a free practice valuation. And that's what we do is that's the first step. We do a free practice valuation with
Okay.
no obligation.
Out of curiosity, what kind of time frame
Mhm.
does this process take?
Mhm. Yeah, so let's say that, you know, Allison Orthodontics wanted
Mhm.
you were looking into it and you
Mhm.
would send me all your financial info. Basically, it's just standard information, last 3 years tax returns,
Mhm.
um, P&Ls, some reports from your practice management system, financials, and then we would have a valuation done. Normally, we get it done in about 2 weeks. And
Mhm.
then we go over, we do a Zoom call with the doctor, and we are able to show them for the first time how their practice looks, unlock the real value of their practice from an investor's lens rather
Mm.
than an individual's lens. And
Okay.
what we do is I mean, only good things can come from that because
Mhm.
we're either uh, gonna uncover some blind spots, and if you don't have a lot of blind spots, then your practice is in great shape, and
Mm.
we can take you to market and get an outstanding outcome.
Yeah.
If it's not, we're gonna uncover those blind spots, and then you can course correct and potentially, save your or it's going to be millions of dollars of difference in some
Mm.
case. So,
Okay.
planning ahead is very important. Plan ahead and get a professional advisor.
What are some of the key blind spots that you see?
Yeah, like someone's payroll might be out of whack. They
Mm.
might be really in bad shape with their rent. Their supplies spend might be really high.
Okay.
We measure all of these in the complementary valuation. We call
Mhm.
it a prospectus, but we measure those against industry norms
Mm.
in
Okay.
in our valuation, and we help uncover those blind spots.
Okay. Okay. So if an orthodontist is curious but not ready to make a move,
Mhm.
what's kind of the smartest first step they can take to understand their options?
Yeah, they can contact me or us and look into doing that complimentary practice valuation.
Mm.
That'll just help them kind of get a feeling for where their practice is, and where it could go or where it needs to go.
Mhm.
I've got a client right now that um, tried to go to market on their own a
Mhm.
couple of years ago,
Mhm.
um, and then decided not to do anything and then hired us. And since then, unfortunately, they've declined a little, which does
Mm.
create a bit of a challenge, but we're still going to get I believe we're still going to be able to get a very nice outcome.
Yeah.
But if back to the risk in waiting, really what you want to do, is get a great advisor and
Mhm.
then look into it now. Now, that doesn't mean go to market now. That just
Right.
means I'm not going to be pushing anyone to go to market. I'm just going to help them plan. And part of that plan might indeed be looking into things now, but also part of that plan, I've told many of my clients, hey, let's check back in a year.
Okay.
I've got one really large orthodontist that once a year, about every January, we look at the numbers and we
Mm,
reassess. And they
okay.
haven't decided to do anything yet, which is just fine. And they
Mm-hmm.
might not ever. They might always stay on their own, which
Yeah.
is just fine as well. There are still plenty of great private practices out there. And I'm
Yeah.
not here to, I never throw shade on a private practice. I mean, good for them. It's just my job. I consider my job is just to give them all the options
Yeah.
so that they can make an educated decision,
Mm-hmm.
a decision that's best for them and their families in the
Yeah.
future.
Great. Well, Ty, thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
As always, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Orthodontic Products Podcast to keep up with the latest episodes. And be sure to check out orthodonticproductsonline.com to keep up with the latest industry news. Until next time, take care.